Welcome to Dhammahadaya. So today's program we thought of not restricting ourselves on one particular topic or one particular theme, but there are loads of questions that most of our viewers have asked, and most people would like to know, and they keep on writing their comments about our programs. So we thought we'll give an opportunity for those questions to be answered today. And for these, I would call it an FAQ session. For this session, we have invited two resource personnel, the most venerable the Galle Mahinda Thero, reader in religions, philosophies and ethics. He is currently attached to the Bath Spa University of UK. We welcome you, most venerable sir. And then we also have Professor Ravi Koggalage, the former Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic of Sir John Kotalawala University, professor, of course, an engineer, and he is also a meditator, a meditation teacher. I would introduce him that way. I think that's how he prefers. And while welcoming you, Professor, as well, I thought since our immediate last program was about, we had a long discussion about the Vasana season, and we happened to discuss about the higher ordination of bhikkhus. And I remember Bhante explained that the bhikkhus tell their age of monkhood, referring to this higher ordination. I am 5 years old. That is the count of the Vasana seasons that he has gone through physically. I mean, it's not the physical age, it is the time, the years, the physical years he has passed after higher ordination. So I just have this question, Bhante and Professor. Now, among the society we live in, there are even lay people who have gone through a lot of, who meditate a lot, and sometimes have spiritual progress. And sometimes there are people, whether they let the others know or not, some people who believe that they have attained some spiritual progress, let's say the first stage of sainthood, maybe Sohan. Now, the question is, now according to our culture, a lay person always respects the Mahasangha. Whenever we see a member of the Mahasangha passing by, we usually stand up from our chair and we worship, especially the Sri Lankans, we worship Pasanga Pihituwa Vandino. And sometimes a lay person, assuming that he has attained sainthood, would he or should he pay the due respects that other lay people respect to the Mahasangha, even if that monk is not spiritually as high as him?
This looks like a very interesting question, and also I am on the spot, and I think these see they are interesting questions, because if a layperson has attained, if he's a stream winner, Sotapanna, there's a question about whether anybody will be able to recognize him or her. That's the first question. And the second one is whether the person himself or herself will know that attain stream entry. So those two things are there.
If he wear a badge or something, I am so on.
Exactly.
No, supposing he knows it, but the others don't know usually, and the others suspect.
That's right, and often the case, even the person may not know.
Yeah, probably, yes.
It's often the case. And now the tricky question is, I think in spiritual terms, it looks like that person is much higher than average person. Now, this is where the cultural context come into play. The spirituality and the religious spiritual development on one hand as versus the cultural norm. Now, when you stand enough when you see a monk and respecting him. It's like a Buddhist cultural ethos. You know, this is what lay people are supposed to do.
Yeah.
So now, the easy thing would be the person who attains Sohan should be ordained right away. I think that would be the easy way out, you know, because that's why the traditionally says that if you are, if the lay person become an arahant, soon that person will become a monk, perhaps.
Yeah.
You know, the kind of idea is avoid this confusion, and you know, this is kind of one way of getting around. Now,
Yes.
if the lay
It will
person,
make things easy for us if he ordains.
yeah, and also the complication is this.
Yes.
Suppose that if this encounter between the stream winner and the average monk is noticed by the public, that's where the problem lies.
Yes, exactly.
So, if it is happen in private quarters, nobody notice it, then I think it's kind of, you know, it can go undiscovered. But suppose that this happen in, you know, TV interview session or something like that in a critical moment, you know, if something happen like that, and it will be taken as a root activity. So, this is where I think we have to draw the lines. I think spiritually that person is higher, but maybe people will not recognize it, and people are not able to recognize, and there are other complications. And so, the alternative may be that person should become a monk so that he is worthy of respect and so on. So this is a very complex question. And also I had to also mention, when you respect monks, you are not respecting necessarily the physical person. You know, you are actually honoring the Buddha. You know, because I mean that person become worthy due to the fact that person is wearing the robe. So basically the robe represents Buddha. So you are not really
Buddha
honoring
and the Mahasangha, the Sariyut Muggala and
Arahants and all those who attain the path. So
a monk is a representative of the Noble Triple Gem.
Yeah, representation of a vast community. And that's why monks are supposed to behave in a dignified manner, because they are not individuals. They are not ordinary people. And they are representing institutions, and they are representing the
Mahasangha.
imparting the virtues of the Buddha and the community. And so you know, if you respect them, you respect the person who is wearing the robe. So, you know, this is where I think Professor, you may have something.
Yes, I would like to listen to Professor as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you,
Yeah.
because Buddha has clearly mentioned these things in Vinaya rules, like the Chivara representing the Mahasangha, who are supposed to be all, you know, 8 such persons, Magga, Phala.
Magga and Phala.
Yeah, Attapurisa Puggala, the Sohan Magga, Sohan Phala, Sakatagami
8
Magga,
persons,
Sohan Phala,
8
and
holy
so on.
persons.
Yeah. So the Chivara representing that Sangha community. So
enlightened community.
Yeah, in layperson's term, if someone think, okay, I achieved this Magga Phala, so I should not venerate the Mahasangha, because he or she not attain such
Maybe
level.
that's the ego, the
Yes,
mana.
it's a kind of ego, and this is totally against Buddhism.
Basic Buddhist
Buddha's
idea.
Vinaya. Yeah.
But
So
don't you have
we-
that
we
ego
should,
until Arahathood?
like even if a lay person attain any type of Magga Phala, must venerate even the Samanera, not only bhikkhus, because of the Chivara representing the Mahasangha. Buddha and the Mahasangha, those 8 noble persons.
Enlightened disciples.
Yes. So if you cannot venerate, that means there's something wrong with his or her achievements.
Okay.
That is how I see
Okay.
it.
So I guess we got a very clear-cut answer for a very complex question.
Not a clear cut. This is a very
Okay.
difficult question. It's a very difficult question, isn't it? It's a very
That's
difficult
right,
one.
but the answer is clear, I think.
Yeah, so it's clear.
The
Yes.
lay persons, they are supposed to
yeah, pay
venerate,
respect, and
pay
also it's a
respect,
cultural. It's a lot of things in a cultural context. See, if you don't respect the monks, it appears in the public as very rude activity,
Of course.
and that's the where I think the lot at
Yes.
stake.
And the others will generate akusala karma just by
Not-
criticizing that act,
Yes.
I suppose.
And also Buddha was so clear about this, even among the Sangha community, seniority considered from the Upasampada, not by the achievements of Magapala.
Yeah.
So even an Arhan, they should respect their teachers and the other senior
Senior monks,
monks based on the Upasampada,
ordination.
ordination,
Yeah.
higher ordination. And that is known as the birth as a Sangha community. I remember this story, this Angulimala
Yeah.
Thero's
Yes.
story. So when he has seen
Ariana
this,
Jato.
when he seen that pregnant woman suffering, so he asked from the Buddha what to do. So he asked him to do kind of Satya Kriya.
Yatoham Bhagini Ariyaya Jatiya Jato
Yes.
Nabhijanami.
So then Buddha was telling I have not killed anyone or killed
After I
any.
had a noble birth.
Yeah, after from my birth.
Yeah.
Then he is asking, I have killed so many
So-
persons.
Yeah.
But then Buddha explained,
The experience.
this is the birth of your
Your noble
noble
birth.
birth.
Yeah.
As
You
a
haven't done
bhikkhu.
anything wrong since your noble birth.
That's right.
Yeah.
So,
So you're
the-
pure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that case, of course, Arahant, but that is also we can consider as a bhikkhu in these days, as Upasampada bhikkhu, that is your date of birth in Sangha community. So that is where we consider the seniority.
Yes.
Even among Sangha community, if there are some monk who achieved higher Magapala, they are supposed to venerate their senior monks according to the Upasampada, the number of Vassana
Yeah.
seasons.
And I suppose the Buddha, being the Buddha himself, respected Mahaprajapati, Gautami, Therani, and Arahat, none of course, but yet being the Buddha, I think he respected her. So I think.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, the story.
Yes.
It's just respected in the sense while she took permission from the Buddha to attend Parinibbana as an Arahat. The Buddha followed her. So I think that's the only person the Buddha followed until.
That is followed.
Yes, followed,
but not like venerated.
no, not veneration, but followed. But a Buddha would never follow another person, another Arahat, but he paid respect to his
aunt.
mother actually,
Mother.
the mother who looked
Mahaprajapati.
Mahaprajapati, Gautami, who looked after when he was a child.
Yeah.
So he paid his respect in that way, without any mana, since he's the Buddha. So having
So
discussed,
is it because of the is it because of affection towards her, or is it because Buddha didn't have his ego, or is it
I think he wanted to
because-
set an example. I think he wanted to set an example to the rest of the society to respect your parents, perhaps.
I see. Kind of.
Yeah, now I'm answering your questions, but
No, I think we are having a discussion.
Yes.
So it's kind of because he was the stepmother,
yeah,
so he was respecting her and honoring her.
that's how I see it.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
Animisalochana Puja.
Yes,
He-
as a
he-
mother.
Yeah.
And,
It's interesting, I think. Very
Yes,
interesting.
that's
Yeah, that's
so
very
that means
interesting.
it's one way it says that Buddha also behaved like other people. Buddha himself behaved like what other people are supposed to do. Because other
Yeah.
people are
Yeah, he
supposed-
wanted other
That's right.
people to behave like that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting illustrative example.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, having talked about mothers, of course, the Bodhisattva's mother or the Prince Siddhartha's mother, the actual mother, Queen Mahamaya, I remember that Lord Buddha went to this the Devaloka to preach Abhidhamma to the Matru Divyaraja. Now, I thought of bringing this point up because there are people in our society who say that the Abhidhamma came to is not preached by the Buddha. It came very much later. So I would like to take this point into discussion because having heard that the Buddha himself went to the Divyaloka to preach Abhidhamma to the Matru Divyaraja or his former mother. Yes, I would like to like Bhante to initiate this answer first.
Yes, I think there are a lot of doubts about various things in the Buddhist tradition.
Yeah.
You know, what the Buddha said and what the Buddha did not say, and what the monks added and how we got all these texts and so on. There are a lot of, I mean, we can, until we die and until we get grey hair, we can go on argument various things. And now this Abhidhamma thing also seems to be something similar, because we will not have a conclusive evidence for that. You know, whether we, how much we argue, we will not find a conclusion. And what I would suggest is that we can look at this narrative, you know, the narrative of mother who was reborn as a divinity in the heaven, and then Buddha, you know, who attained enlightenment and who had affection to the mother, but also who had a sense of gratitude. You know, I want to do something for my past mother, and it relates to what you said earlier about respect your parents. Yeah, and that's there also. Now, other aspect is that about our text. You know, we think that in the Theravada tradition, we think that we have Pali Canon. Pali Canon has 3 sections. One is discourses, you know, 5 texts, and then the second one is called Vinaya, the discipline rules. It has 5 texts, and then according to Theravada tradition is Abhidharma or psychological or higher teachings. We have 7 texts. Now that's what we call Tripitaka, and now we have them physically, these texts, but when you look back the history, you know, these texts were not written down until 80 or 70 BCE. You know, it happened in Matali in Aluvihara in Sri Lanka. So that roughly about 500-600 years later, after the Buddha. 500-600 years later. Now before that, maybe about 238 or 235 or 300 years or 250 years ago, in India we hear that there was a council. This is called Third Council, and Emperor Ashoka, who was instrumental in introducing Buddhism to Sri Lanka, and he is the one allegedly sponsored the council, and now that council came because of a lot of disputes. You know, there were divisions and there were oppositional points of view, and the monk who headed the council, Moggaliputta, he thought that I want to refute the opponent views, and so he wrote this Kathavattu. Kathavattu is the 7th text of the Abhidhamma.
Kathavattu
Pakarana. They use the word Pakarana, and it's basically 500 questions, 500 answers. So now it's clearly, the account says that work is Venerable Moggaliputta's ideas. So that's the one I think most people will use, say there's a gradual development of Buddhist texts, and the final text of Abhidhamma came at least 250. Because there may be other stories, but that's one story, and I will allow two of you to.
And before that, I would like to add something that one should not forget that even it is so that Venerable Moggaliputta was an Arahat.
He was an Arahant.
Professor.
Yes, of course he was an Arahant, and also other texts such as this Milinda Prashna. So, it is also something similar to that if you take
Yeah.
that argument.
Yeah.
But if you read Milinda Prashna, it is all about the Dhamma,
Yeah.
the whatever you can find in suttas and
So it's an extraction of Dhamma from the rest of the sutras.
extractions, but additions as well in the sense of different similes given.
Philosophical questions.
Yes, question and answers how
Okay.
he has answered, but the what the actual Dhamma is you can find from the other Tripitaka,
Yeah.
the especially suttas, Sutta Pitaka. And this Abhidhamma, of course, I have met certain monks and even lay persons arguing both sides, telling some used to reject Abhidhamma, telling it is not from real Buddha's words. But in my view, how I used in my meditation practice and also understanding Dhamma, Abhidhamma helped me a lot in understanding the
Other
Dhamma.
parts of the
Yes,
Yeah.
because I see it as a detailed explanation of sometimes which
nature of mind.
yeah, which have been briefed in suttas. You can find a very detailed explanation, but the thing is, it's a bit difficult to understand as well. Lot of theoretical things like
You mean the sutras?
no,
No, the
in
Abhidhamma.
Abhidhamma.
Abhidhamma,
Okay.
it's really difficult to understand.
Yes.
It's
Unless
more systematic and classified and
Yeah.
deliberately
yes.
organized.
So, this is one reason I see some people used to reject this, simply because they can't understand. Right? It's easy to say it is not Buddha's word or something, but when you see this complexity and how the relationship of these things, when you read Abhidhamma, you may realize no one else except Buddha can preach such a deep
Meaning.
meanings,
Yeah.
because when you when you understand little by little, you will see how profound them, and also during meditation you can experience them. That's it.
And I just correct me if I'm wrong. I remember that Venerable Moggali Puttathissa was there during the Buddha's time as well.
No,
He was
Much later.
much later.
much later.
Because
I remember Emperor Asoka called for bhikkhus who lived during that time. There was 1 or 2 monks who exceeded 160 years or so, 150 years or so.
there are
I just can't remember whether Venerable Moggali Puttathissa was one such monk, but there was a monk who has
I
seen
think
the
there are
Buddha.
stories about various
Yes.
monks who had
I
long
was just-
life.
Yes.
See, the question is that if you think about new debates about the date of the Buddha, it's quite fascinating. And recently, one of the UNESCO projects, like 2013, they excavated in Lumbini, and they haven't finished this excavation results yet, but apparently they uncover a layer below the Asoka's temple, and apparently they discovered piece of wood. They think it's the tree under which Buddha attained, or Buddha was born. So the Sala tree.
Yeah.
And
Actually, the archaeologist came here
Yeah,
for an
Prof-
interview,
Cunningham.
Professor Robin Cunningham.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now, that he basically kind of going back to the Sri Lankan chronology. Robert Cunningham says that according to him it may be 6th century BC. But in the Western theories,
That's what our books say.
yeah. But the
Yeah.
Western theory is kind of there's no conclusive evidence when the Buddha lived, but only we could find is that can be very conclusive about Ashoka because of his inscriptions,
Yes.
because of his contact with Persia, Greece, and so on, Alexander the Great, and so on. So roughly, we think that the dispute is whether the gap between the Buddha's death and Asoka's time 100 years or longer. And now in the Sri Lankan tradition, it's usually about 300 years. But in the Western classification, about 100 years. Now, your argument will work well if we accept the Western one, because if it is 100 years, it's possible. Some of them may would have been. But we are not for sure, and so the current date is usually there's about 200, 250 years gap between even the Buddha's life. It could be 7th century or early 5th century, 200 years. So it's a kind of we are kind of talking about things that we do not know enough, and
That's
so it's a kind of rough estimates. And definitely Moggaliputta would not have been, but maybe it's some others.
I remember reading it somewhere in literature. Yes.
Anyway, for me it is not that important, because Buddha has clearly mentioned to see Buddha you have to see the Dhamma. Yo Dhammam passati somam passati.
True.
So whether you have seen physically Buddha, it doesn't mean you have seen the Dhamma. So if we know definitely he was an Arahant, Arahant Moggaliputta, that means he has seen Dhamma in one way, and
also he seems to be quite authoritative, kind of write a book like Kathavattu. He seems to know in and out of the Buddha's teaching, because otherwise you cannot write a reputed book like this, kind of answer the questions that opponents give. So I think maybe this question of whether Abhidharma was preached or not is not that important, and I will go with Professor's idea that if it is useful for practice, if people, it's useful for people to do more meditation, and also to kind of understand how the consciousness and the various types of chitta and works, and
especially this Chuti and Pratisandhi kind of these things you can't find in suttas. You have to look through, go through
and
Abhidhamma.
if it is useful, then it's more fruitful to think it's useful for us. Why not try it out? Rather than dwell in whether it's Buddha's teaching or not. It's really insignificant by itself, because it's a futile debate in some ways.
That's right. And also we should not forget the fact the half of this complete 84,000 Asuharadhak Dhammaskandha, the half of them, about 42,000, consists of Abhidhamma. So if you are rejecting Abhidhamma, that means you are giving up half of the whatever remaining.
I think the funny situation has to do with scholars. Scholars like to have layers. Like for example, scholars would say, certain parts of the Sutta Pitaka belong to Buddha's time. Certain parts of the Vinaya-Pitaka is of course after 20 years of the Buddha's time. Because we have internal ideas, and then Abhidharma came late, and so on. The kind of layers, because of this classification, people tend to say that Abhidharma is late, and it may not be Buddha's word, and so on. It may be quite true, but the most important thing is why we use any of these things. Why we want to use suttas and vinayas and what purpose? I think we wanted to use them to understand the Buddha, and it doesn't matter whether it's late or early. And if there is a kind of harmony and consistency among these things,
that's right. If you can see whatever in the Abhidhamma, it is matching with the sutta, then there's no dispute at all.
There's no dispute, and also we should not argue about it. And if it is useful, I think it's worthwhile to use them for our curiosity and expansion of understanding.
If you can't understand, and you see it is different from whatever in suttas, then I think one should think back about yourself, because it is lack of understanding. It is not something wrong with the Dhamma, but our understanding.
And also I want to add something also, and now Abhidhamma is called Agama in some literature, and like in Chinese and called Agong. Now, lot of research is going on now comparing the Chinese canon and the Pali canon. and also a lot of research is going on, as Professor said, with meditators, you know, the Abhidhamma and so on. So a lot of meditators find in the West, Abhidhamma is actually quite useful for meditational practice. And also a lot of people think that Abhidhamma has the more scientific elements of Buddhism rather than the Sutta and Vinaya. So these are the also facets that we should keep remember. You know, this is the area that is not explored well. The texts are not translated, as Professor said. It's not very easy to understand them. It's under-researched. It's a wealth of material there, and a lot of research need to be done actually to come to a conclusive argument whether they are late or not. But more engagement with them is very useful, I think.
And I think we should be, we are extremely fortunate for having it.
Yes.
The Abhidhamma Pitaka.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Would you give the same answer if I ask about the Jataka stories? That people also argue that the Jataka stories were not stories uttered by the Buddha, where animals talk and the impossible things happen, Professor?
Well, for me, it's clear they was preached by Buddha, explained to different people in, you know,
Yeah, I'm
using
talking
his
about the
own
Panchepanas
stories.
Jataka.
Yes, those that's a collection of
Yes.
Buddha's stories about his previous births. Like you can see many examples in suttas also. It is you know, quoted like when he talked to like Devadatta something, the Serivani Jataka, and also I don't know, for me there's no doubt about that this Buddha's
I think
preaching.
the debate has
when
come
it
because
is
animals
written-
talk.
Yeah.
So probably I think the animals also have a way of communication.
Yeah, it is not
between each
unusual,
other.
isn't it?
It
I mean, our dogs
Yeah.
always communicate
It
with
is
us. Yeah.
clearly
Yes,
accepted
that's
in
true.
yeah, Buddhism. It is clearly accepted. Anyone can reborn in any of 31
Yeah.
realms.
Yeah.
So animal is one
Yeah.
thing we may reborn in.
Yeah, and also I
The-
wanted to say a little bit more, because it's these animals, of course they don't speak Sinhala,
But a human related it later on. That's where the language
that's
came,
right.
I suppose.
And also suppose that if you hit a dog, the way he bark or cry is different,
Yeah.
and you know, it's
Exactly.
similar to our crying.
Yes.
And when you go home, the way the dog comes to you, and you know, kind of with jubilance, you know, that you know, he speaks to you. He or she
Yes.
communicate with
Of course,
you.
we can understand each other if you have a pet or something.
That's
and
right.
In
So
my
this-
case, we have few dogs there. The way they express,
Yeah,
for example, when
they
they
communicate.
yeah, communication.
And elephants, you know, I went to recently to Kotte temple, you know, Kotte Raja Mahavihara, and the head monk took me to see the
Elephants.
elephant, and he speaks to the elephant. Vandino, the Hamduremut Vandino. So the elephant bent, and then oh, you do like this, and then elephant, you know, kind of, you know, he goes on the ground. So now here, the monk is speaking Sinhala,
Yes.
and his
Elephant
elephant
can understand.
it, and not only that, he does it very well.
Yes.
I mean, what can we say? I mean, the elephant speaking or understanding Sinhala. So these kind of interesting. Now let's get back to the question about these Jataka stories. You know, there are a lot of layers. You know, Jataka is one part of the Sutta Pitaka. You know, called Khuddaka
Khuddaka
Nikaya.
Nikaya.
You know, the fifth collection. And now that fifth collection has a lot of good texts, like Dhammapada is there, Sutta Nipata is there. So now Dhammapada is definitely one of the original texts.
So if you are
Definitely.
rejecting Jataka, you should reject Dhammapada as well,
Yeah, it's in
because
the
it's in Khuddaka Nikaya.
Yeah, so it's quite possible. And Sutta Nipata is one of the very oldest layers. So this Khuddaka Nikaya has, and then other texts also. Now Jataka is one of them. Now what is more useful is to approach it in a different way. Now Jatakas are very useful narratives. You know, we can tell those stories to children, and we can preach them in the sermons, and they speak to people. And so all of these, like Vesantara for example, talks about, kind of, how should we practice generosity.
Dana.
Santivada Jataka, it talks about how we should cultivate patience. Now, what it does it talks about all these paramitas, 10 paramitas or 6 paramitas, the perfection. And now these are the foundations of Buddhism, like renunciation, morality, meditation, charity, and these are the virtues it cultivates. And it's very grounded, and Buddha's life is the one used to illustrate it. And of course it says that he was born at this time and so on. Maybe the numbers may not be right, but it has a very important function within the Theravada tradition, because Sri Lanka wouldn't be the same without the Jatakas. And a lot of people before Buddhist TV, a lot of people learn Buddhism through Jatakas. And the villagers learn to be Buddhist listening to Vesantara Jataka.
Yeah.
And now these are the powerful stories, and nobody will have read Dhammacakka Sutta. Nobody would have access to Dhammacakka Sutta, but they would have listened to Vesantara Jataka. So here, interesting question is not whether it's late or not, what it does, or what it has done for us. And I think it can very meaningfully can teach the foundations of Buddhism, foundations of what we call Buddhist culture, or Buddhist qualities, what we should inculcate, kind of the loving kindness, patience, and so on. So, I would emphasize that the content and the meaningful way of using it, and then look at the temples, all the paintings, kind of nicely decorated and illustrated, and that's how Buddhism spoke to people, and that's how the Sinhalese tradition passed down, and that's quite important, I think.
Yes. And
Yes, Professor.
and Venerable Sir, if we take any Jataka story, there are 3 sections in each story about the present situation, Buddha, what is the reason for
him
this,
to preach,
and the past story, and also the last one is very important, the Samodhana, I think the how to relate the who was that, like
explanation of the characters.
Relating characters. Yes, matching with the present characters to the past characters.
Yeah.
So that is Samodhana, I guess. These things, so it's a kind of fact that it's happened in Buddha's time, and he has explained about the previous story, and
he's recalling, and he's giving explanation, justification. That person there, he was like this in the past, and I was the guy there who was his friend, enemy, or friend, or this is my relation to that, and this is the Ananda who was there, like that. Kind of it's kind of more graphic, 3-dimensional story. It's quite like a drama.
Yeah.
So it's
that is one thing, and also we should not forget here in each of these Jataka stories, many have achieved Maggaphala as well. So there's a kind of spiritual value as well. Even we do not know how to see it, right? But during those times, there are persons who have achieved Maggaphala, higher status.
And I suppose those characters are still live among us. We can see such characters within the society, and we could match those characters to the present society. I thought I'll move on to the next question. I thought I'll ask Professor the next question. Now, something I have come across, a question that I have come across. Professor, if I ask you, do you think that you have a right to take away your own life?
Well, it is like killing another person or animal. You are killing yourself.
Yeah.
So, worldly level, it's a sin, bad deed. definitely result would be reborn in Dugatis.
Okay.
Because
But,
it's a akusala kamma.
Yeah. But what about the instances that the Bodhisattva practiced dana paramatta paravi? Sometimes he offered his life to quench the hunger of another person or a creature.
Yeah, that is a different story.
Okay,
You know,
that's what I
offering
would
your
like
life to certain good purpose and killing yourself, suicidal attempt, these are two different things. I was talking about the suicidal attempt. If you try to kill yourself, it is definitely bad deed,
Okay.
known as pavo, apunya visankhara. So result would be bad
Because
result.
usually you kill yourself with a lot of distress. Unlike in the situation of a Bodhisattva whose intention is to sacrifice it for someone else. Is that
no,
what you
offer
mean?
in your life is a different matter. We can see when we talk about this Niyata Vivarana, the one story, he offered his body, top of his body, Buddha and others
Sumedha,
can
yeah.
walk, Sumedha Tapasa. So it's a kind of offer in your life.
No, I'm talking about
The-
something like Sasajataka, where the rabbit jumped into the fire. And I have heard of this Mahayana story where the Maitri
Tigress.
Buddha, yes, for the and the Gautama Buddha were bodhisattvas, and the Gautama Buddha, the bodhisattva, offered his life to the hungry tigress to refrain her from eating the cubs.
Yeah. So
Yes, Bhante?
I think
Yeah.
this is a very, very contemporary, controversial question. We can approach it, you know, for Buddhism in general, the life is important. Whether one's life, other person's life, or animal's life, you know, because we use the word sentient being. So any being who has senses, we should not deprive them from those senses. So killing is basically depriving the senses. So
Yeah.
killing another person is bad, but killing yourself is also bad because you are depriving your senses. And why? Because when we live, there is a purpose for our life. That means to awaken us. You know, as long as we are alive, we can practice and awaken ourselves. So if we commit suicide, we deprive that opportunity, we terminate ourselves early on, and we miss the boat, we lose the opportunity. So that's another thing. And then in relation to it also, because the life is the most dear thing to us, life is the most dear thing to us, and if we terminate our lives and we do it with hate, you know, because we love our life most, but we hate ourselves, we cut ourselves. So on those grounds, we could approach and say, taking your life is not a Buddhist thing to do, because you deprive yourself. And Buddhism would say that because you do it a lot of hate, and maybe your next birth will be bad, and so you are kind of in a journey which is the minuses, you know.
This is just
Yes,
to interrupt
Professor.
you. This is one place I use Abhidhamma because this is a Dvesha Moola Sit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a Akusala Kamma
Akusala kamma.
due to hate.
Yeah.
So definitely you will get a bad result, Vipaka,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Bad
because
birth,
of
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would like to
sorry.
move on
Yeah.
to euthanizing. Now, suppose you do it now, suppose an animal or a person is suffering a lot and you kill it. Perhaps an animal has met with an accident and is suffering a lot, and you decide, I think it happens in usually the Western world mostly, and you decide to kill it just to make it free of its suffering with a good intention. But is that an akusala kamma, Professor Ravi?
Okay, these are arguable, but
Yeah.
according to my understanding, whatever the reason, if you decided to, you know, it's also, even we use different term, it's kind of killing, taking up another life. So who are you to decide that? because there was one story, I can't remember where it was, that's the someone, king punished the person to kill him, and he spent 2-3 days while dying. He was thinking, oh, how I am suffering, it's better to die before that. And one of his friends, born as Devata, and he was telling, don't think like that. It's better to live a little bit more rather than dying. Because this human life, if we consider, whatever suffering is there, it's much better than, because next life you don't know, you may go to the Dugati. It's the when you compare the suffering here and there, this is not a suffering at all. So even while you are dying, it may be, we don't know how much painful, but still there's a possibility of understanding Dhamma, because you are a human being.
And also
right?
you can do a lot of things.
Yes.
Positive things, creative things.
Yes, within your mind.
Okay,
You can
suppose
do
if
lot of
it's
things.
a human who's dying
Yes.
and he's suffering a lot physically,
Yes.
and if he's asking another human to kill him because he's to free him from suffering.
If he is
So-
asking, it's a different matter, but
So
if
does it-
others deciding,
Yeah.
because he is suffering,
If he asks
I
his
think
friend
I
to
think it
kill,
is a complex factors.
Yes.
There are a lot of things here. There are government regulations. You know, various governments say these are the limits of what you could do. You know, in these situations you cannot take life and so on. So I think in any country, first we have to pay attention to the laws in the country. Yeah,
Of course.
legal system. Now, I think in the Western countries usually say if you take life, that is wrong. Now, and then suppose that as a person facilitator, if you wanted to take that life, of course you do it with good intention, called compassionate action. You will do it in compassionate action, and that will have some consequences, because you are taking somebody's life. Even though that person asking you, you could do it, but in strictly sense, it may have some results, whatever, because it because you do it as a favor. It's kind of plus and minuses. You know, kind of course you may have to do it, but then consequences, there are karmic consequences, there are the legal consequences there, and then personal consequences there. You can be happy that your friend is free from the agony. So these are kind of, I don't think there is a one clear answer to this question, that multifaceted, you know, new interesting questions.
perhaps I feel that perhaps you may gain a minor kusala kamma with a major kusala kamma.
Quite possible.
yes.
Quite
Yes.
possible.
Yes, I'm really sorry, folks. Even though this is an interesting discussion, we have to wind it up because our time is up, and we are extremely thankful to the Most Venerable Digalle Mahinda Thero, and we invite the Thero to join us for another couple of programs. Whenever he comes, he visits Sri Lanka, and we are also extremely thankful to Professor Ravi Koggalage, who visits us occasionally, and of course very often, not occasionally, very often, and distributes his Dhamma knowledge with us. Thank you so much. And we intend to meet you once again with yet another fruitful program on next Monday. May the Most Noble Triple Gem bless you.